Hello all and welcome back to the Pipe Cottage. We're told in Scripture that there is nothing new under the sun. Now, I have tried to come up with different topics that deal with something other than the cultural division that we now have in the United States. But I've been thinking about this for so many years. What we think began just a few years ago didn't begin just a few years ago. People are up in arms because of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. They're up in arms about a lot of stuff that's happening at a fast rate of speed. But it's all coming to fruition. This has not just started overnight. And recently I was watching a couple of videos of Rush Limbaugh in the early 90s. And he was saying very much the same thing that conservatives are saying now, that there is a strong cultural divide. And he was dealing with the same topics, same issues that we're dealing with now. I think what's happened is the lies of relativism, the lies that the Constitution is a living document and we can reinterpret the meaning of American politics and American constitutional government with each passing generation. All that has now reached a boiling point. It's reached a boiling point. And when I was coming up as a boy, I was raised in a very, very conservative home. Very Christian home. And it was not unusual. It was rather common, particularly in our part of the world, the great state of South Carolina. Most people that I knew coming up as a boy were strongly conservative and strongly traditional and overwhelmingly Christian. That wasn't unusual. And we were anti-abortion, anti-big government, anti-socialism. And all of this was very clear. There was no question about what we believed. Now, I didn't know people when I was a child or even in my teens or 20s. I didn't know people who, until I got to college now, I didn't know people who were constantly worried about questioning what truth is, questioning what matters and what does not. It was intrinsically taught. It was an inheritance that was being lived out day to day. Now, what I think is being lost and at a very rapid rate of speed, especially over the past decade, is this stability that we used to have in American communities. There was a point in time in the not too distant past where we didn't have to question the benefits of tradition. We didn't even have to seek to define it. We lived it. It wasn't something that you tried to defend on a daily basis or define or write about or talk about. You just lived it. You did it. It was who you are, who you were. It was in an intrinsic willingness to be worthy of the traditions to which we are heir. That is now gone. It's gone. Most people who are in their early 20s, most young adults in America now, are dealing with a major, major crisis of what it means to be an American. Why? Because we have told our children for generation after generation that you've got to go to college. You've got to get a higher education. Don't try to work with your hands. Don't try to have a life where you build something on your own. You've got to have the education. But why did people send their children to go receive an education? Not so that they could be educated, but so they could make a lot of money, which is the exact wrong reason for seeking an education in the first place. I could tell you story after story after story of classroom situations in college, master's program, PhD program, where I had to listen to a bunch of crap from professors who thought that they knew what they were talking about. I never put up with it. Now, I realize that some very important, strong voices in American politics and American culture didn't go to college or didn't finish college. Rush Limbaugh was one. Charlie Kirk was one. The list goes on. But I did. And I can tell you from that experience that those men who spoke against the secular humanism in American colleges and universities are exactly right in everything that they said about it. Just a couple of examples to share with you. 17 years old. I graduated high school at 16. I skipped the 9th grade, graduated at 16, started college at 17. Finished a bachelor's degree at 20 years of age. I go into a biology classroom at the University of South Carolina. The professor tells me, all you Christians who think that God created the world, you're fools. You can't prove that he did that. Well, I stood up in a classroom of 300 freshmen and I said, sir, I may not be able to prove scientifically that God created the world, but I challenge you to prove scientifically that he didn't. Oh, man. And that was the attitude I had when I went through college. It is a miracle that I finished a degree at all. I remember taking a history class at the University of South Carolina, and the professor proceeded to say that Confederate soldiers were no more than racist thugs. I raised my hand and I told the professor, I said, now hang on, I think we might need to reconsider that. That's a very, very serious charge for a lot of people who we need to really know more about. And the time I said that, there was a student from Jamaica sitting at a table behind me, and he said this. He said, you people were racist then, and you people are still racist now. Did I try to argue with that particular student? No. At 18 years of age, I said, this is a waste of my time. I got up out of the class 45 minutes into the session, got my satchel, pushed the chair under the table, and I walked out of the classroom. I was not going to go back. Had it not been for the professor of that particular class emailing me and seeking a dialogue, trying to learn more about my perspective, I would not have gone back to that class. I've dropped out of 2 or 3 different classes over the course of my formal education because I could not stand the secular humanist philosophy presented on day one by the professor. Even in a math class I had to take in college. The first day of class, the math professor tries to use his profession to say there are no absolutes. Look at these numbers. They fluctuate. There's no such thing as absolute, including absolute truth. Okay, so we're here to learn about math. The math professor wants to use his platform on day one to attack any idea of absolute truth in the minds of people who are teenagers. Took a sociology class one time. Now, I didn't drop out of that one because I found it to be very interesting. And I would have conversations with the professor until one day one of the other students said, Alan, we just want you to be quiet. We don't really care about your opinion. And she said this publicly in front of the rest of the class. What we care about is learning what the professor thinks we need to know so that we can pass the class. The colleges and the universities need to be shut down, fumigated, and opened up under new management. Most people who go to college, their brains are not fully developed yet. It's scientifically proven that the human brain does not fully develop until you're about 25 years old. They don't have enough of experience of life under their belt. And I am past the point of saying that we need to teach critical thought to somebody who's 18 years old. Teach them how to be thinking critically. No, you need to teach them how to think. You need to teach them what to think about. You need to teach them about good literature, history, philosophy. Teach them what they need to know. You can't be a person of critical thought unless you have a foundation of knowledge to begin with. Most people who are going to colleges and universities now are not coming out of a private or homeschool situation. They're coming out of a public school environment that's not teaching them what they need to know. And I tend to agree with Ken Ham. I'm not a strong fan of Ken Ham's work for the most part, because I think he leaves a lot of different elements out of the story, especially when it comes to creation ministry. But he's right about this. If you are not convincing people by the time they end high school that there is a God and that we are accountable to that God, by the time they get to college and university, especially in an American context, what they're going to find is attack after attack after attack in classroom after classroom after classroom of the things that they were taught as a child. Because American colleges and universities, their sole point, their sole basis is to get students to question what mama and daddy taught them to be true. I never did that. I studied history, and the more I studied it, the more I realized that daddy was right. I didn't have to question it. Never wanted to, and it never even came into my mind to do so. Most of what I know about history did not come from a university classroom. It came from my library. It came from experience. It came from talking to old farmers and old families that I knew in my home community in South Carolina. It came from getting to know the everyday value system of people much, much older than me. This is nothing new. All of this talk of cultural warfare, all of this talk of various and sundry political divisions in American society, it's been happening for decades. But because of social media, but because of current events, more and more people are waking up to the reality that people like me have been living with since the teenage years. So what's the answer? The answer is not well, there's several different ways you can answer the problem. Spiritual revival? Yeah, that would be great if it lasted. Most of the time when I look at spiritual revivals on a national scale in American history, it happens for a very, very short amount of time. There's an emotional uprising where people are upset about something happening in current events, and they become interested in God for a brief season. And after that season, they compartmentalize God into a certain aspect of their life, and yet nothing changes across the board that shows people that they are in fact a child of God. They are committed to the things of God from this point forward. That's Aiden, my son. And he's more important in this video. So I need to go see what he needs right now. But I want to share that with you. There's nothing new under the sun. What's happening in the United States now is a culmination of cultural division and conflict that's been going on for decades. Anyway, I'll continue this conversation at a later date. This is Alan Harrelson with the Pipe Cottage. Thank you for stopping by.